Chinese stock market's a strange beast, Tom. I think it's important to keep in mind a couple of things. The first is that there's a signal there. The fact that China's stocks are amongst the worst performing in the world this year is a gauge of the weakness in China's economy. At the same time, it's important to remember that China's stock market, whilst kind of symbolic of the economy, is not the economy. There's not a lot of household wealth in the stock market.
Right.
Businesses aren't raising a lot of capital by issuing shares. So yes, this is scary. Yes,
Right.
this is a bad sign. Yes, this is why Xi Jinping himself, we hear, is planning to intervene. But it's not
Right.
quite the catastrophe for China that it would be if in the United States
Okay.
the S&P 500 was down so much.
Right now, we're clearing a market in New York City. It's called office towers. And, we have a whole process, bankruptcy or transactions, whatever, to clear. They don't have that structure. How does a totalitarian regime clear a distressed market?
So it's a really interesting question, Tom. And actually, I don't want to sound too kind of Pollyanna, everything's fine about this. But part of the problem here, part of the short-term pain, is that China is moving to get rid of that problem of moral hazard, get rid of that problem that investors believe that the government, in the final analysis, will stand behind all the banks, stand behind all the real estate developers, and prevent them from failing. It's the removal of that implicit guarantee, which is actually one of the big causes of stress and pain in China's markets and economy right now. But when they get through the end of it, and it's going to be a long process, we think the property correction still has a couple more years to run, an economy and markets without such a severe moral hazard problem, well, hopefully it'll be an economy and a market which is primed to grow and rise again.
Hey, Tom, I know President Xi and other Chinese leaders over the last 6 months or so have been courting Western investors, Western countries, kind of arguing about or supporting the investment thesis for China. But there are a lot of investors, not just EM investors, who are saying China is uninvestable because of the China risk, the government risk. Do you sense that that the government of China understands that and that they're willing to make any types of changes to be more receptive to Western investment?
So the China investment story has got, I think, three really big problems. The first big problem is that we've gone from an economy which in nominal dollar terms was growing about 20% a year to an economy which in nominal dollar terms isn't growing at all. That's significant negative for investors. The second is relations with the United States. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you put your money in China, there wasn't that geopolitical risk. Now there's the risk of tariffs, the risk of sanctions, the risk of political blowback. The third challenge, as you mentioned, Paul, is that investors now believe that Beijing doesn't have their back, right? And I think it's that piece of it which Xi and his premier and other members of China's leadership are now trying to row back from. The trouble is, those other two negatives, falling growth, increased geopolitical stress, they're still there. And that means the mood music remains pretty challenging.
And what's the expectation, Tom? I kind of think about, I guess, what's the expectation that this Chinese economy can fundamentally turn itself around? I think of, just the demographics of China just don't bode well for the economy longer term. And I'm wondering, what can the government do to really turn this economy around?
So when I think about China right now, I think about a really significant negative in the real estate sector, and I think about a really significant positive signal in the electric vehicle space, right? Okay. Real estate is collapsing. We can't sort of put lipstick on the pig. They've got massive overcapacity there. It's going to be painful as they work through that. But this too shall pass, right? By 2025, 2026, they'll be through the worst of this property correction. The electric vehicle story, I think what that speaks to is China's longer-term potential. China's economic miracle from 1980 till today, it's not been based on real estate. It's been based on moving up the value chain from textiles to toys to leadership in high-speed trains, sustainable energy, and now electric vehicles. And it's that story which, if it's sustained, means that China's economic miracle, whilst not what it was, is also not over.
But to clear the market, and let's assume they, as they've done before, they just write off, refund. Where's the money come from to bail out the property market? Do they just print renminbi? Is it that simple?
So I think there's a couple of things to say here, Tom. The first is that China is a high-saving society with a closed financial system. And what that means is that the banks are almost always really well-funded. Think about the Lehman collapse in 2008, where money fled from the big banks in the United States. That's just not going to happen in China. So that sort of funding crisis issue isn't going to be an issue for Beijing.
万事不求人，私人助理、私人顾问时代来临了。六度万事，万事相助，超强博士群不断奉献专项服务，信息、财经、健康、文娱、教育、旅游、消费、科技、美食，让您的生活品质全线升级。六度世界现在体验，请去3w.6度.world。
限时免费期间，全体注册网友免费使用付费版的高级功能如下：支持论坛搜索，免费画图。第一步，点击右上角最左边的机器人符号开始对话，像图片中红框中的那样。第二步，如图选择六度万事，我们未来将推出更多的 AI 供大家选择。然后就可以与六博士悄悄畅谈了。还支持论坛内部信息搜索哦。您还可以让六博士做你的助手，帮你绘制漂亮图片。最后可以点击添加好友进来，一起与六博士工作。一起来3w.6度.world尝试吧。